Welcome to Meristem Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, Peter Rousonelos and Taylor Flynn from Meristem Crop Performance join us to share the latest updates from Meristem and discuss practical strategies for maximizing yield potential and helping growers get the most from every acre.
Welcome to Meristem Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Lynn, and we have two special guests this week. We have Peter Rousonelos and Taylor Flynn, both with Meristem. Peter, you've been on Cup of Joe a couple times before. Taylor, you are new. Why don't you guys give us a little bit of background about your what your positions are at Meristem and kind of where you're located, I guess, too.
Yeah, so thanks for having me again on the show. Always appreciate being on Cup of Joe. Peter Rousonelos, I'm a Senior Vice President of Business Development. I actually live around the Princeton, Illinois area. Farm not too far from here. Got some acres right across the river on the Illinois side from Burlington, and spent a lot of my time traveling around, working with key accounts and growers, and actually lately been more and more focused in the Midwest with some of our sales reps like Taylor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Taylor Flynn, Southeast Iowa, Northeast Missouri. I am the sales territory manager, so I get the privilege to work with Mershmans. Been here about a year now, so it's been exciting. Meristem is a company that's all about being able to create the best process for their growers at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is having a system to be able to create the best yield possible for their farms. So excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine that was like drinking from a water hose. I remember jumping on with Meristem, like us teaching our sales managers everything about the portfolio, and it's a heck of a water hose to drink from for sure.
Yes, it is, absolutely.
Not as bad now that Peter's finally listened and pared the product lineup down.
Right, we're trying to trim it up and keep it easier, but Bill makes a great point. I mean, Taylor comes to us from seed business, seed background, and you know, we love the guys that got the seed background. They understand the value of the seed. They understand the value of what we first start with as farmers and the investment we have in seed. And at Meristem, it's really about taking and optimizing that investment, you know, from start to finish. And we also try to focus a lot on taking costs out for guys. You know, how can we offset costs different ways and still maximize that investment that they made in the seed that they bought from you.
Yeah. So where we are at right now, you know, we got a lot of corn that's in that V8 to V12 time frame. Guys are starting to think about fungicides. We've got a lot of moisture. Now we got a little bit of heat working on. We got a lot of humidity, a lot of dew in the mornings. So we're getting closer to that fungicide time frame, and I think that's kind of what we wanted to highlight a little bit about the third stage of the growing season for the corn when it comes to, you know, kernel fill, kernel development, and how we protect some of that. So I think you got some slides you wanted to share.
Yeah, so as been mentioned, I mean, you know, title of this kind of finish strong, right? Maintain and protect yield, and I really want to put an emphasis on protect. When we think about corn, you know, as you mentioned, we're getting into getting closer. We're not very far. I mean, here we are, 4th of July, and we're going to be flying. You know, fungicides going to be flowing on here pretty soon, right? It's going to start going, and those tassels are going to start popping with this heat that we've got. We know we're set up for disease. We've had the moisture. So hey, let's first think about protecting, right? Let's get out there with our fungicide, and what can we pair with that to make sure we don't lose yield potential. And so the way we look at that is we kind of think about it as a powerful combination. We're big fans of a product called NKBS Evo, which is a combination of potassium, boron, sulfur, molybdenum, and then the Evo is actually a combination of sugars and some other components to help really drive that nutrient into that plant and also help manage some stress. And then Revline Late Season, that's something we've talked about before on here. Revline Late Season is a 3-way plant growth regulator. But don't be thinking, oh gosh, it's a PGR. I don't want my plant to be growing. I want it to be thinking about maintaining grain and filling grain or filling pods, and that's exactly what Revline Late Season does. Revline Late Season is built to not necessarily grow roots and shoots like we think about PGRs earlier in the season. It's meant to activate the plant's processes to best manage reproductive stages, mitigate stress, best utilize photosynthesis, and then drive sugar to grain and retain. If anything, we're trying to retain as much of that grain as possible. Because when it's hot and dry or it's cloudy, we get a little thing called tip back, right?
Yep,
Taylor?
absolutely.
I mean, you think about that tip back, it's not that we're not going to get any, but we think about what happens when it's hot and dry. Even we've got this plant set up for success.
Anything that we can do to minimize stress at the end of the day, right?
Reduce kernel abortion, reduce pod abortion, right? Those kind of things. Where we can make yield is when we can hold on to the yield potential we've already created in corn, and then when we can grow and push the yield potential that is going on in soybeans. So this combination really does that. Provides the nutrients to fill grain, and provides the PGR to manage the stress.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that I wanted to highlight on, or see if either one of you two have a thought process behind this, and I think we're probably going to get into it just a little bit here and in the next couple of slides that you had to show, but what makes the NKBS different from other products that are out on the market? Because there are lots of nitrogen enhancement style products that are out there. There are a handful of boron products that are starting to become a little bit more popular. So I mean, maybe just hit on that. Why is NKBS so different than anything else in the marketplace?
Well, I'll take that. NKBS, you're right. There's a lot of products in the market, right? And so NKBS, what makes it unique, I think, is the robust quantity of product that is built into one product. There's a lot of companies out there that will maybe put 2 or 3 products together in a recommendation, and they're not wrong. You know, hey, use this potassium product, use this boron product, use this sulfur product, and now you're handling 2, 3, 4 products. I used to do it previously back years ago in my background, and it works. But it's arduous, and and it's costly because you're using multiple products. What's unique about NKBS is it's able to build a high amount of the products we need that are important to grain fill, but also pairs in other technologies like sugars that I mentioned, and other organic acids that really mobilize that nutrient into the plant quickly, and also help manage it for stress. So it's really also a formulation difference between, and I'm not saying other competitors' products are bad. We just know there's products out there that they might be less cost, but it doesn't mean you're getting all of it into the plant, you know. And we jokingly sometimes use the analysis, or I've heard it before, that you know, take a 5-gallon bucket of water, right, and try to drink from it. I mean, for some entertainment here on 5, we could probably do that, right? Or you could buy yourself one of them nice, you know, just a 1-gallon jug even. If you take a 1-gallon jug of water, like the old days when we used to work out on the farm, you know, who had water jugs? You just had a 1-gallon jug of water. 1-gallon jug of water, and just drink from that versus a 5-gallon bucket. How much of the water are you going to get from the 5-gallon bucket versus how much of the water are you going to get from the 1-gallon jug? The technology is the jug. The jug being the technology, we paid more for that 1 gallon of water than we did the 5 gallons out of our garden hose into a bucket, but I got it all. I got all of the 1 gallon. And so that's the big thing, is there's technology built into this that ensures that the plant will take all of the nutrient in and use it.
Thank you for hitting on that, because there's a lot of different products out there. Obviously I'm biased a little bit, but I think that NKBS is just a completely different style product that's on the market.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, we've improved it over the years and messed with it, and I think, you know, I think it was 3 years ago, right before we started working with Meristem, we added in the sulfur. We had a product that was NKB. It was, you know, boron and potassium, and it actually had a little bit of molybdenum in it, and then we were able to add in the sulfur and not reduce the quantity of potassium and boron at all, and that really took this product to the next level. So that combination has been huge. And
then now you have the Evo edition as well, so 2 major step changes within the past 3 years.
Yes, and one thing at Meristem is, when, you know, we try not to get married to what was good last year or 2 years ago. You know, if there's something better now that we can add to it, we're going to do it. That might cost us a little bit on inventory sometimes, but it's the right thing to do. And this Evo is a great example of, that's a new addition this year to the lineup. You know, last year it was called just NKBS. This year it's NKBS Evo. Same great product with enhanced technologies.
Yep.
So as we get into kind of the why, just quick run. I mean, potassium and boron are key in source to sink when we're thinking about moving nutrients to the plant. So you've built this plant early. You've got this robust plant that is now moving into reproductive processes. What that potassium is going to do is it's going to really help influence the movement of those sugars. We're going to get those moved to the grain. The boron is really going to help build strong cell walls, keep that so that nutrient, those sugars can move to that grain, not leak out and really what I cause internal bleeding, which is what causes disease. So we're gonna keep all the nutrients that we spent money on, and we're gonna move those to the grain more effectively. And then that molybdenum is really gonna help us mineralize and take up more nitrogen. And then the sulfur, we always know sulfur is good. That's a protein builder. We're gonna keep that plant green, keep that plant chlorophyll going at a high rate. And then those sugars, that EVO, we talked about that. That's just to help really get that stuff into the plant more effectively and really manage a little bit of stress at that time as well. And that's the same for soybeans. So I won't completely repeat all that. Take the same exact thing I said, which is just, again, it's moving sugars. It's all about sucrose load in the plant. Everything we've done up to this point is to build as much sucrose as we could in that plant. Now we have to move it. So that's what we're going to do with potassium and boron, and really help retain those pods, fill that seed. One of the things we think about when we've worked with U of I in the past is that they got us thinking about is it's not only kernel retention and pod retention, but it's kernel weight and seed weight, and that's what makes high yield. So the number one reason I want to tell everybody out there listening is to don't quit now, is because I bet it's probably close to 50% of our yield being determined from pollination on, and we're really thinking about what we can do to influence keeping what we have and increasing the weight of what we have. I'm not saying that number is exactly accurate. I've heard anywhere from 25% to 50%, and I'm going on the higher side because I'm more of an optimist. But I'd like to think I have a lot more out there to still get out of this crop.
What we're seeing when we're doing product evaluations on corn, especially the stuff coming down the pipeline, when you're looking at what I would call our heavy hitters, our high yielding products, kernel depth. That flex in that kernel depth is something that's been characteristic across that. Now, what is the downside of that potentially is if you don't have enough groceries underneath it to fill that, you're not maximizing that genetic potential of that particular hybrid, or worse, you're actually starving that plant out and not giving it its mechanisms to build yield. So these style of products, right timing is extremely important, because we did a presentation last year that you guys put on. I thought it was really neat that we can almost trick the plant into thinking that it's not potassium deficient just through this application. And given our geography, I'd venture to say probably 90% of the acres are we're squeaking by on our potash levels in the field. So having these style of products, we're helping to overcome some of these potential problems that we could have in the marketplace.
Well, I think you bring up a valid point. I mean, we always say part of our job is to optimize the genetic potential that you guys are planting out there and that you're providing to the farmers in the field. And so these genetics are changing. That potential is changing. We know we can put on a lot more weight. That kernel can be deeper, though. We can put on more pods. We can, set more pods, more nodes. All the things we're after to graze as much yield as possible. But you mentioned it. Because of that, if we lack a nutrient, that plant will actually start to cannibalize itself to get that nutrient. And when we do that, that plant gets sick, and that plant will basically kill itself off early, which leads to lower test weights and other things that we don't want. So yes, is NKBS going to replace all the potash on your farm? No. But what it is going to do is give us optimal timing of a nutrient that is in higher demand, even higher demand than nitrogen during this time. So that's why it is heavily weighted towards potassium in the NKBS formulation. But it's a combination to do exactly what you just mentioned, Lynn. And so the second component to that, we have NKBS, and then we have, like I said, Revline late season, and that's a combination of choline and GABA, which are two PGRs, and then it also has cytokinin in it. And the choline and GABA, they basically protect that sugar factory. They're going to keep that plant from being under stress, reduce that ethylene glycol production, which is that natural hormone that plant creates, right? When it's under stress, it knows it's under stress, it creates that natural hormone. Which means it's going to say, hey, I'm going to produce what I know I can produce, and that's it. So I'm going to kick off what I can't, right? Its number one goal is to produce a fruit and die. So that means it's going to kick off what it can't produce and produce what it can. And we're basically telling that plant not to do that. You have the ability to produce everything that you've established at this point. Let's keep it and let's fill it. And let's not get rid of it. And so I really want to emphasize the stress management component of this product. The cytokinin is in there to help really drive root hair redevelopment in corn and soybeans, and which is still critical to water uptake and nutrient uptake. And then it's also there to drive in trifoliate development still in soybeans, because obviously we've got more than just reproductive processes going on in soybeans. So that's where that cytokine is going to help us and really slow that senescence, slow that maturity of that plant, keep it healthy so that we can continue to turn that sugar into starch, right? Which is what's going to bring us our high yield. Kind of just an example of that I like to toss out that I saw at actually a Meristem meeting. I was able to see this slide, and we've got a great relationship with the Advanced Agrolytics crew. They do a phenomenal job. But, stress, this was on corn. What I like to really highlight on this is we always think about stress as hot and dry. What about hot nights, right? What about when it gets above, 80 degrees at night? It's hard for that plant to respirate. It can't take a break. Somebody used the example one time, Taylor, just imagine working outside all day long in this heat and then going home to no air conditioning and you put a blanket on. How well are you going to sleep?
I'd be miserable.
Be miserable,
Yep.
Right? Well, if you're out in the heat all day long as a crop and you don't get a chance to respirate at night, you're miserable. You're tired, you're stressed, and you start to lose the ability to hold on to that opportunity to produce as much fruit at the end. So not only hot and dry, but hot nights and then cloudy days. I think that's the other one that doesn't get spoken of as much as we get these, what do they call it, smoke from Canada or cloudy days, whatever the case is. If it's cloudy, it's not photosynthesizing at maximum ability, which means, again, that plant thinks it can't produce as much. And Advanced Agrolytics did a little stress timing effect on yield with shading the crop for 2 weeks at a time. And obviously, if you shade that crop at VT to R1, that's a bad day. There's just no coming back. You're not getting much. But you can see, as we get into even R2, R3, R4, and right before VT, being shaded for any extended amount of time limits that potential of that crop versus unshaded all the way to the right-hand side of that shows a significant difference in yield potential, and we're wanting to manage for that. Not saying we can stop it completely, but we can definitely manage for it and improve it. And so another statistic I like to look at is why would I want that healthier crop? Maybe it's going to be wetter. Maybe it's going to be it's okay, it's going to be healthier. And if it's wetter at the end, there is a point where that plant will naturally dry itself down and actually be drier than a plant that dies early. So you'll actually harvest drier corn that'll be green and standing and easier to harvest. And that's what we're looking for. And for every day that we can do that, we can pick up a 1.5 bushel yield increase for extended grain fill. And this is all supported by work done by Advanced Agrolytics. So definitely like to touch on that. So to kind of summarize that, look, we're coming up here in reproductive stages. Fungicides around the corner. What can you do? We're looking at VT in corn or somewhere around that stage, that R2, R3 in soybeans, and we're saying pair that NKBS with Revlon late season, put that in with your fungicide pass. We call it owning the process, which is build the sink, move those nutrients, run the factory, keep it moving, and fill the grain. And that's what we're looking to accomplish here at this time of year.
Now, those are some awesome slides. For real world applications, Taylor, I'm going to throw this one at you.
Sure.
What's the timing? So, just as in fungicide, there's probably 10 different answers on when the optimal fungicide timing is. When you're doing something like this, when is your favorite time to be picking pollination, or what are some of the different scenarios on, do you lean early, do you lean a little bit late? What's your thought process there?
Well, I think it starts with you got to know what disease you have in the field, right? So if we're coming into tassel and you've already got tar spot or southern rust blowing up, it's time to at least go make that first application, get everything knocked down. If you don't have a lot of disease present at that time, there's nothing wrong with tassel. And like Peter said, it's all a process. It's creating a process that works, that's best for you. So I don't want to tell somebody to go change something completely different if they have a system that works for them, but there's ways to enhance their system.
Gotcha. Peter, do you have a thought on that as well?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Obviously, if you do have high disease pressure, that's going to drive that decision. And so if you go on the earlier side, if you're, some guys I know, some people do 2 applications. Right. They'll do either side of pollination. You can do this both times. But if you do got to go earlier, these products are still going to really help that because we're going to enhance that pollination. But if you can wait because you don't have disease pressure, I would say the sweet spot is basically full VT. When we've got full tassels, that's what I'd call the sweet spot. That's the bell curve, right? Kind of right in front of tassel. We're going to still do really well right at tassel. We're going to maximize it, and then following tassel, that bell curve will start to drop again. And the reason that it drops after tassel is because we've already established the grain. If I don't get a chance to save the grain from aborting, I can't save it once it's gone. So I'd say our number one ROI is right before tassel to tassel, but don't let that stop you if you are on brown silk, because we can still really impact kernel weight. And so agree with Taylor. Focus on the ergonomics around why you're making the pass and what you're battling on insects and disease, and just know that these two products can impact that, and they're not going to impact, we're not going to have any concerns about mixing with it. We're not going to have any concerns about, is there any safety concerns to the crop? I like to always just mention that because I get those questions sometimes, right? We got some people out there that are concerned, years ago we had, the different adjuvants and things may have caused like a beer can ear. We're not going to get any of that kind of stuff with these two products. Soybeans, I'm a fan of that R2, R3 pass. I really am. Probably right at R3. We got guys that will run twice, one at R1, and then they'll push their R3 to maybe R4. So again, in a year like this, we've got probably going to have some disease pressure. I'm probably going to go a little bit on the earlier side because I want to manage that disease. So I might find myself in that R2, maybe just coming into R3 stage.
I think we're going to see a lot of guys with the focus on what you were talking about. The University of Illinois is talking about, weight and the different components that make yield, specifically on soybeans. And with guys owning their own sprayer or having a retailer help them out with making these applications, it's a lot less expensive to run that sprayer out there when you're not having to pay a helicopter, drone, or a plane to get out and get across the field multiple times. So I think the real opportunity for growers is making that R2, R3 time frame, and then pushing that back and try to extend grain fill as long as possible with another fungicide, maybe a cheaper fungicide, something a little bit less expensive that does exactly what we were talking about here.
Yeah,
growers keep the factory open as long as you can.
Growers have a lot of options with these fungicides today. There are a lot of good fungicides out there. There's our what I call our higher priced, higher value fungicides, and then we've got our staples that we've had for a long time. Those oxy, strobins, those pyractus strobins that we find in Headline or in Quilt. Great products. They're part of other products that are higher value now. So I'm with you, Ben. We'll go out there with those higher price components sometimes on that earlier side, but then if you want to come back later to really manage grain fill, you can do it pretty cost effective with a less expensive strobe and curative.
Yep. So you hit on tank mixability and some of those things. One of the other unique parts is pH of the NKBS, and I wanted to hit on that. And before I forgot about it, I wanted you guys to talk just a little bit about that chart that we talked about like 4 or 5 weeks ago on Cup of Joe with adding the upshift C and what are the different components that kind of go that direction. So I'll let you steer that where you want.
No, you brought up a really critical point, Ben. pH. I mean, pH can make or break us sometimes the tank mixes, and as an industry, I'm really glad you guys talked about that on Cup of Joe. I think it's really good information and something we don't think about as much. And so, all these products do impact pH. And NKBS is actually a positive for the tank mix. We don't see a significant spike in pH. We actually have some components in there that help us modify that pH. But still, yet you've got your water, you got your fungicides, insecticides. These other nutrients. I've seen water as high as 8-9 pH, depending where you're at, and some that's sitting in the 6s range. And really optimal, according to that chart that you shared a few weeks back, is 5 for stuff to really work optimally. And when you think about the expensive application we're getting ready to make, the fungicide's half-life is minutes when it's above I think it's above a 7 or an 8 pH, and so. That's really critical. When you tank mix, fungicide's low use rate, so we tank mix it sometimes and it sits in a tank for hours. Sometimes it sits overnight. And so pH is critical, and we can lower pH with a product called Upshift C. And we've got it in Upshift C Plus and Upshift C, both of those, and we have an Upshift CK brand. So depending on what you guys have in inventory, any of those would work for this. And what we found is you get a nice foliar nutrition hit, but we're actually dropping the pH by a minimum of 2 points, and we kind of recommend that ½ pound per acre, so you can get the foliar hit of the phosphorus. But if you're not going for the foliar hit and you just want to manage that pH, typically about 1 pound per 100 gallons will do that for you. A lot of guys will just take a 50-pound bag and throw it in a sprayer load and treat it that way. And I know, Taylor, you've been out, you've done a lot of pH testing.
Yeah,
what are you seeing?
I'm seeing exactly what you're talking about. Pulling water straight from where they're getting their water source to make these applications. And I ask them, like, where do you think it's at? No, it can't be, much over 7. And seeing a lot of 8.5s, a lot of 9s, and a little upshift in the tank mix, and then we're down in the 5.5. So we're doing exactly what we want to with it.
And it holds.
Yes.
It's holding. It's not only a flash in the pan. That from your experience, Taylor, you were dropping those.
Yeah.
I think 2 things come out of that. One, my water's fine. It's a 7, and then it's an 8.5.
Yep.
Right, and so that can be critical to the performance of the tank and the fungicide and the investment the farmer's making. But so you saw it drop, but then also it stays dropped.
Correct. Absolutely.
That's the big thing. A lot of these products, they might only impact it for a few hours. We've done tests for as long as 3 days, and we don't see that pH start to go back up.
So when you're doing all your testing on your waters, Taylor, like municipal versus well versus what have you, like where are the waters in our general area, like out of a well versus out of municipal for the different
most have been out of wells, I would say. A few municipal, but most are out of well. And like I said, I think everybody was shocked with how high it was. Everybody had in their brain that they're fine, they don't have to worry about it. And to Peter's point, I've got a tank mix still sitting in my office from a couple weeks ago that is still running at 5.5. I just checked it again over the weekend. So
yeah, no, that's good. That's definitely something we need to keep reminding growers about when we're doing fungicide and even herbicide, insecticide applications.
And going back to what we're doing with moving this nutrient source to sink and managing stress, what's one nutrient we don't have in NKBS Evo? We don't have phosphorus. And phosphorus is still a critical component to grain fill. The problem is it doesn't mix with a lot of these. When we build these products, phosphorus is hard to get to mix with much when you build one product. So this is another way to not only manage pH so that everything's working great, but you can actually get yourself a phosphorus hit, foliar feed for that late season grain fill.
Good deal. All good topics. Lynn, you got anything else you want to cover there?
No, I think those are great points, and we're starting to see Septoria sneak in on some beans that were less than ideal weather conditions. So that's something that we're definitely going to be. You and I had a discussion on it with with Septoria. The biggest it's a homegrown disease that we fight that comes basically off of the splashing of the inoculum off the soil. And if there's a plus to the beans being a little behind, and we're in that R2 stage, R3 stage, we might actually be able to go in and treat that. The problem is a lot of times when we see it, we're probably a month, if not 3 weeks from now. We got a big canopy. We can't get that fungicide down through that plant. We're not really attacking that Septoria. And then the problem is once those leaves fall off, we lose that node, and then we're looking at a 3-bushel hit there. So what's causing it is not good. We fight it every year though, but some of these guys, with being in the adverse conditions, they are actually helping them out a little bit, because we're not going to be able to drive that fungicide a little further into that canopy and hopefully retain those pods, retain that node, and be able to handle that. And then we're just seeing some Phytophthora kind of sneak in, and there's a lot of conversations around seed treatments and fungicides and natural tolerances within the plant. But really, when we're dealing with those diseases, we just want to do everything we can to keep. If we're losing plants, we want to keep the plants that are there healthy. Feeding them, protecting them is going to be the greatest return on the farmer's investment at this point, because we're going to need less. We're going to have less beans trying to carry more of the weight, so we want to protect the yield that we have out there.
That's another great point. Another thought that I wanted to circle back around with. We are getting the phone calls. A lot of waterlogged acres out there. What are your suggestions for some of these guys? Do they continue to push forward? Have you seen NKBS or Revline late season? Have you seen that turn a crop around faster than what Mother Nature would normally turn that crop around? Is it worth the spend to continue to drive this crop into yield potential?
Yeah. So obviously, some situations are going to be unique. If the unfortunate truth is that a significant portion of that field has either been completely drowned out or set back so far that we think we've taken as a massive hit. Let's say 50%, right? Then that's a decision that is easier to make. But there's a lot of these fields, to your point, that they might be affected to the tune of anywhere from 1% to 10%. And that's probably a lot of them. I've driven all over the countryside the last couple of weeks. I live in an area where we've had 12 inches of rain in the month of June. And I'll tell you that, probably personally I'm going to put 5% or so on my own personal crop. And it's showing up now. We're getting that yellowness as those saturated low areas are starting to show. We're getting that yellowness in the corn. We're even see it in some beans, like you mentioned, Lynn, where it's set back a little bit. What we're doing is, I think it's still worth chasing it. I think there's a lot of that crop out there. It looks excellent, and now the heat's coming, and it's going to explode, and it's going to grow. And I'm seeing it on my drive over here. I drove across much of Illinois and into Iowa here. I've drove clear over to Ohio, here in the last couple weeks as well, and seen a lot of crop. And I personally I'm not backing off, and I'm going to run my fungicide as planned, and I'm going to run the NKBS and the late season and manage my pH with the upshift, because the areas of the field, the 90% or the 95% that I have, I need to maximize my opportunity, right? And there is going to be disease out here. Harvestability will be an issue if we don't keep these plants healthy. And part of keeping the plant healthy is not only the fungicide, but actually making sure we're not potassium deficient, making sure that we can fill grain fill, and make sure we manage that stress. Because I think the heat, I'm not a weatherman, but it feels to me like we're going to get into a time frame that's going to get a little stressful in this crop, right? We've had all this water. What happens if this water goes away? What happens if we get into hotter times? We're coming to a pretty critical time. To give an example of what Lynn was talking about, my own personal beans, they're a little bit behind. And actually, I decided we're going to spray fungicide and the NKBS in the late season, and we're going out there they're going out there here soon, and you can still get down the rows of that plant, so I can still do it very cost effective. They're going to run a ground rig, and we're going to get down to the base of that plant, and we're going to make sure that plant's not deficient on anything, and I'm going for yield, and then I'm still coming back here. I'm probably going to push it back a little around that R3, R4, and that's when we're going to fly it on. But to your point, Lynn, you bring up a great point, and we're managing for that. And so I think this is a time to double down and make sure that we maximize our opportunity in that 90% of the field that's still really good, because it can overcome the 5 or 10% that's not as good. That's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, and you've been around the game. You kind of know how it goes.
Old.
Yeah,
I'm old.
You're old.
I'm old. That's a nice way of saying you're old.
Yep.
I talked about it last week a little bit, but how many times probably have you taken a phone call back in your retail days or today where 4th of July timeframe guys say their beans aren't growing, they're not going to throw a crop, and then we're combining waist-high beans when it comes September, October. It's so hard. I get it to not want to bury the checkbook in the month of June and July, but there's just so much real estate left on the back end of the yield curve that we have that it feels almost negligent to not look at a spend that's going to have a pretty high max ROI on it.
Oh, and you bring up a great point, and I don't even mean it demeaning to anybody, right? I mean, I've been around it for a little bit. I am old. Okay, fine, let's get it out there. Taylor, you're young.
Perfect.
I'm old.
I'll take it.
And you guys are somewhere in the middle. So, but nonetheless, you're right. More times than not, I'll get phone calls. I'll even get phone calls about fungicide still. Hey, do you think I should spray fungicide? This person says I shouldn't spray fungicide, or that person. I think sometimes hate to say that, everybody's thinking about, well, if I tell them not to spray fungicide and there's no difference, well, then I'm $20 to the good. And that meant I gave a good recommendation. And people are afraid to sometimes go out on a limb and say, this is what you should do. And the grower's just looking for advice. They're looking for somebody with confidence to say, this is what you should do and this is why you should do it. And if history serves us, one of our partners in this company always says that history is a great teacher. It's one of the best teachers. And history has always told us that if we have the conditions we have now, we are going to have disease. We are going to have issues. And I have seen it to where guys walk away from that and they regret it come harvest, right? Where they're 30, 40, 50 bushel off from other people that manage their crop. Their harvestability is not as good, which also costs money. And then you can say the same thing for soybeans, right? So, yeah, we're only halfway down the race, right? If this was a football game, we'd be coming into halftime right now. And there's a lot of games that get won after halftime, and there's a lot of time left in this. And good or bad, and it's definitely not a time to pull back.
He's out of old, so he has all these metaphors.
I have all these metaphors.
So,
I mean,
The Meristem haikus.
the Bears won the Super Bowl in 1985. I do remember that. So
I'm gonna go on a limb.
I was not born yet.
Yep, neither.
nobody's born yet.
We're in the 90s. I guess I can't speak for.
I'm
Taylor.
90.
Yep. So sorry, Peter.
Graduated high school in '94.
Lots of wisdom, for sure. Okay,
We just haven't made. We're relying on you to help us not repeat history and make the same mistakes.
Teach us the ways.
We're going to make you guys listen to the Cup of Joe corny joke before we get out of here. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to cover or highlight? Okay. Well, we obviously appreciate your guys' time. Lynn's going to give us some corny jokes, and we'll get on out of here.
Yeah, we were gonna, talking about the 250th anniversary of America coming up and 4th of July as this airs, and I just couldn't do any 4th of July jokes. Just felt a little traitorous, so I'm gonna switch to right now the Dome of Death is affecting most of the Mershman listening area, and if those of you that haven't left your house yet, it's hot outside, really hot. So I'm gonna do some hot jokes here, and unfortunately they're not hot, they're terrible. It's so hot that chickens are laying hard-boiled eggs.
Yep, pretty terrible.
And that's awful. What happens when you step on a hot grape?
No idea.
It lets out a little wine.
There you go. Like I said, thank you again both for being here with us today and talking about some of the next processes as we're coming down the line here. We hope everybody has a safe 4th of July and spend some time being thankful for what we have and the people that allow us to live in this country the way that we do and thank them for their service. So we're going to get on out of here and hope everybody has a good 4th of July, and we'll catch you next week.